Have you ever noticed how many organizations today, from like your local city council down the street to the massive global corporations whose apps are on your phone, have these incredibly eloquent, high-minded mission statements, but then they just completely fail at executing their most basic operations?
Oh, yeah. Constantly. It's everywhere.
Right. I mean, you read their website and it sounds like they are about to, usher in a utopian era of harmony and innovation. But then you try to call their customer service line to fix a billing error or, I don't know, try to get a massive pothole in your neighborhood filled, and the entire system just feels paralyzed.
It really is a universal frustration for anyone paying attention right now. I mean, we find ourselves living in this era where the gap between, moral language and operational reality, it isn't just a minor administrative annoyance anymore.
Yeah.
It's really evolved into this structural civilizational vulnerability that degrades, every single level of society.
And that structural vulnerability is exactly what we are exploring for you today. We are taking a deep dive designed specifically to help you, the listener, understand the invisible mechanics of why the systems around you fail, and I guess more importantly, how they actually succeed.
Right.
So we're pulling from this really fascinating book manuscript today that details a framework called the Diamond.
And the text itself is just this massive synthesis. It blends systems thinking, governance studies, and civilizational analysis. And it does this by breaking society down into these interconnected spheres, politics, economics, the physical environment, and the social milieu.
It's a lot. We have a mountain of material in these sources, but today's mission zeroes in specifically on Chapter 3. So we are going to explore this really provocative argument about why basic competence is the ultimate non-negotiable engine of civilization.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
We want to show you how to spot the structural slide into institutional decline, like long before a system completely collapses.
Because Chapter 3, it makes this compelling case that a society, or honestly, even just a small startup company, rises or falls entirely on its ability to place capable people in the right roles.
Right. It's that simple.
It really is. When an organization loses the ability to match capability with responsibility, that's when you start seeing those visible symptoms of decline that we all complain about.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because one of the first things the text points out is this growing, honestly dangerous misalignment between credentialed expertise and actual competency.
Yes. That distinction is crucial.
We are talking about the difference between having the right pieces of paper, the advanced degrees and the impressive titles, and the ability to actually achieve the stated purpose of your job.
And researchers cited in the text, like Kaplan, Graeber, and Cowan, they've thoroughly documented this phenomenon. Basically, institutions are expanding internally at this unprecedented rate.
Oh, the bloat is real.
Exactly. They hire more administrators, they set up all these overlapping committees, and they generate an increasing volume of highly polished moral language. But inversely, their actual operational capacity just plummets.
Yeah, you see it all the time. A grand policy is announced with tremendous fanfare, but the mechanism to actually implement it, it simply doesn't exist.
Right. Sweeping infrastructure plans are drawn up, but the actual physical structures, they either remain unbuilt or they're just left to decay.
I was actually trying to come up with an analogy for this while I was reading, and it feels like hiring a contractor to build your house.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right. So you look at their promotional brochure, and it features these beautifully written 50-page essays on sustainable housing paradigms and equitable spatial dynamics. And you were incredibly impressed.
Naturally. Sounds great on paper.
Right. But then they build your house, and the roof leaks the very first time it rains.
Because when water is pouring into your living room, all that beautiful literature about housing paradigms, it doesn't keep you dry.
No, it really doesn't.
The language is just acting as a smokescreen for a complete lack of mechanical skill.
My question, though, is whether this is just an inevitable symptom of modern, bloated bureaucracy, or if it points to something deeper in our culture. Like, is this a political issue?
What's fascinating here is that the author insists this is strictly an operational diagnosis. It is not a partisan or ideological one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether a society leans left or right, or whether its stated values prioritize equality over hierarchy or vice versa. None of that matters to the diagnosis. The diagnosis simply asks, does the institution possess the mechanical capacity to achieve its goals?
Because a society cannot function purely on ideals.
Exactly. Without actual competence, noble intentions are structurally meaningless.
Well, if placing capable people in the right roles is the absolute foundation of operational success, we have to talk about how we define that placement. And the sources use a word that carries a massive amount of modern baggage, which is meritocracy.
Yeah, that word triggers a lot of people. But the text is very careful to strip that word of its current cultural baggage. Within the Diamond framework, meritocracy is redefined simply as functional alignment.
Functional alignment. Okay, unpack the mechanics of that for me. What does that alignment actually look like when it's, working properly?
Think of it as a direct, continuous operational chain. It starts with capability.
Right.
If an individual possesses capability, they are granted responsibility.
That makes sense.
But that responsibility necessitates authority. You need the actual power to execute the task you're responsible for.
You can't do the job if your hands are tied.
Exactly. But here is the key, that authority must be strictly bound to accountability.
Ah, there's the catch.
Right. When you are held accountable for the results, you're forced to engage in learning. And that learning ultimately feeds right back into improving your initial capability. It's a loop.
And the sources point out that high-performing civilizations throughout history share 3 specific traits that keep this operational chain intact.
Yes. First is the core concept of competence itself, which is the rigorous matching of capability with responsibility. Second is a profound sense of duty.
Like putting the system above yourself.
Exactly. Individuals in power must act as custodians of the system, prioritizing its function over their personal gain. And the third trait is excellence as an embedded cultural expectation.
Meaning it isn't just like a pleasant surprise when someone does their job well.
Right. It is an absolute requirement dictated by the norms of that society. You don't get a gold star just for doing the bare minimum of your job.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, because as I was reading the sources, I noticed the mention of Michael Young.
Oh, right, the sociologist.
Yeah, he actually coined the term meritocracy way back in 1958 in a book called The Rise of the Meritocracy.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he didn't mean it as a compliment at all.
No, not at all.
It was a dystopian satire. It was a warning against oppressive elitism. So as we embrace this idea of functional alignment, aren't we risking exactly what Young warned about? Like a society ruled by a disconnected, credentialed elite who just build walls around their own power?
That is a crucial trap to identify, and the framework explicitly addresses the difference. Functional alignment is not technocracy, which, often devolves into rule by disconnected experts.
Right.
It is not elitism, which is ruled by entrenched social classes. And it is certainly not hyper-credentialism, which is just ruled by paper qualifications, which is the exact problem we started this whole conversation with.
So what makes true functional alignment different?
True functional alignment demands actual, measurable performance. And to prove this, the text explores historical examples of systems that successfully utilized functional alignment specifically to prevent power from consolidating around an elite class.
Yeah, the text mentioned Venetian administrative rotations. I was curious, how did that actually prevent elitism in practice?
So, in the Venetian Republic, they knew that if a magistrate stayed in a district for too long, they would inevitably build a patronage network.
Like a web of favors and loyalties.
Exactly, a web that insulated them from accountability. So by constantly rotating administrators, the Venetians intentionally broke those networks before they could even form. It forced the administrators to rely on their actual administrative skill rather than their personal connections.
That's brilliant. They also brought up the Confucian examinations in historical China and the Prussian civil service reforms.
Right, so the Confucian exams, despite having real flaws, they were revolutionary for their time because they created a pathway for highly capable people from non-aristocratic backgrounds to actually enter the administration.
So you didn't have to be born into the right family.
Exactly. You had to demonstrate capability. And similarly, the Prussian civil service reforms were designed to professionalize the bureaucracy.
Instead of just handing jobs to wealthy nobles.
Right, because wealthy nobles might be entirely incompetent. So the state began testing for actual skill to root out corruption and incompetence.
So all of these vastly different cultures understood a fundamental truth. You have to actively protect competence from the natural human tendency to consolidate power around loyalty.
Precisely. Which means if functional alignment works so well, we have to ask why leaders constantly abandon it. And the answer is usually just human psychology.
Which means we need to look at the dark side of this framework. Like, how exactly does functional alignment break down? Because I imagine a civilization doesn't just wake up on a Tuesday and collectively vote to become incompetent.
No, institutional failures almost never start with dramatic, malicious intentions. They begin with micro shifts in behavior, and it's usually driven by a desire to avoid conflict.
Right.
A leader, perhaps feeling insecure, decides to appoint someone to a key role based on personal loyalty rather than proven ability.
Because loyal people don't challenge you.
Exactly. And then actual accountability gets quietly replaced by procedural compliance.
Meaning, as long as you filled out the 50-page sustainability form correctly, it doesn't really matter if the actual roof you built collapsed.
Exactly. The process becomes the goal rather than the outcome. And the sources reference the political scientist Francis Fukuyama here, who calls this phenomenon patrimonialism.
Patrimonialism.
Right. It's what happens when professional objective standards are gradually eaten away and replaced by these networks of personal loyalty and patronage.
And this is where the text introduces what I honestly found to be the most chilling concept in the entire manuscript, the Collapse Cascade.
Oh, yeah. It's bleak but accurate.
It maps exactly how this dysfunction metastasizes across the four spheres of society. Walk through the mechanics of that cascade. Where does it start?
It originates in the sphere of politics. When political leaders lack the actual knowledge or experience to fulfill their duties, maybe because they were appointed through those loyalty networks we just talked about, they experience deep uncertainty.
Naturally. They don't know what they're doing.
Right. And that uncertainty breeds anxiety. So rather than defining clear tasks and making difficult choices, anxious leaders focus entirely on protecting their own positions and hiding their incompetence.
Well, if the people steering the ship are paralyzed by anxiety, I imagine that forces the rest of the crew into a very defensive posture.
It does. It pushes the next fear, economics, straight into avoidance. Economic leaders, they rely on political stability to make long-term plans.
Makes sense.
But because the political layer is anxious and erratic, economic decisions that require courage and capital are simply postponed. Planning becomes entirely superficial. The really difficult conversations about how to allocate scarce resources are avoided because, frankly, no one wants to take the risk.
But you can only avoid reality in boardrooms for so long before the physical world demands an answer.
Which brings the cascade crashing into the physical environment. This is the stage where administrative delays meet material reality. Because maintenance was deferred and budgets were manipulated, physical systems begin to fail.
Right, like the water grid breaks down, the power grid fails during a storm, the infrastructure degrades.
Exactly. And when physical reality brutally exposes those administrative failures, the system turns to accusation. Instead of fixing the problem, leaders spend all their energy looking for scapegoats.
It's always someone else's fault. And the final victim of this entire chain reaction is the social milieu, right? Like the everyday citizen.
Yes, when citizens endure persistent failure in their physical environment, followed only by endless blame shifting and accusation from their leaders, the social sphere settles into apathy.
Wow.
Expectations just hit the floor. Mediocrity becomes completely normalized. The society collectively accepts that failure is simply inevitable.
Let's ground this massive sociological concept in a tangible example for you, the listener. Let's take a rusting city bridge you have to drive over every day to get to work. It doesn't fall apart overnight.
Right.
The cascade starts when the mayor hands the bridge maintenance contract to a loyal but totally unqualified campaign donor. The mayor is protecting their political network. That's the anxiety phase.
And the unqualified donor doesn't actually know how to fix the structural steel and honestly doesn't want to spend the money to hire someone who does. So they just paint over the rust and defer the expensive, necessary repairs. That is avoidance.
Fast forward 5 years. A brutal winter hits, a crucial support beam snaps, and the bridge is closed indefinitely. The mayor holds a press conference and blames the unpredictable weather, while the contractor blames the previous administration's original design.
Classic.
Right. No one takes responsibility. That is accusation.
And finally, you and your neighbors realize the bridge is never going to be fixed properly. You stop complaining to the city council. You just accept that your commute is now 40 minutes longer and you take a different route. That is the final stage apathy.
It's so depressing when you lay it out like that. But if apathy is structurally guaranteed by bad design, we need to talk about how we intentionally design competence back into a system. Like, how do we reverse the cascade?
This raises an important question, right? And the author provides a really powerful visual model for this structural solution. It's shaped as an octagon, featuring 8 distinct stages. It is called the Diamond Cycle.
The Diamond Cycle.
The entire purpose of this cycle is to force organizations out of linear Newtonian thinking and push them into cyclical anticipatory learning.
Define Newtonian thinking in this context, because I just think of apples falling on heads.
Fair enough. Newtonian thinking relies on linear cause and effect. A boulder falls into the road, creating a crisis. You react by clearing the boulder. You feel successful, but you haven't actually learned anything about why the boulder fell.
Ah, I see.
Anticipatory learning, on the other hand, is cyclical. After you clear the road, you study the cliff face, you understand the erosion patterns, and you build a retaining wall so the next boulder never falls in the first place.
Let's dig into the actual mechanics of the diamond then. How do we get from a boulder in the road to a retaining wall?
So the 8 stages form a continuous loop. It begins with task. You must achieve absolute clarity on your purpose and intent. What are we actually trying to do?
Right.
From there, you move to plan, where you systematically allocate your resources and sequence your actions to achieve that task. Step 3 is develop. This one is crucial. You have to actively build the skills and the physical capacity of your people before you demand results from them.
And after development, you finally hit the real world.
Yes. Stage 4 is implement. This is execution under live, real-world conditions. Once you implement, you immediately move to stage 5, assess. You gather data, you rigorously measure the outcomes, and identify the variance between what you planned to happen and what actually occurred.
Assessing seems straightforward, but this next step, reflect, feels like the stage where most modern institutions completely derail.
Absolutely, because assessment is just looking at the data. Reflection is interpreting the causes behind the data. Why did we fail? Did we succeed because we were skilled or just because we got lucky?
Right. If you don't know why, you can't repeat it.
Exactly. Without honest reflection, the data is useless. After you reflect, you move to step 7, which is learn. Learning is not just understanding what went wrong. It is actively translating your reflection into new operational capabilities. You fundamentally change the way you operate.
And then comes the 8th and final stage, which honestly caught me off guard when I was reading the manuscript. Character. Putting character in an operational flowchart feels, I don't know, unusual.
It does, but it is the defining differentiator of this entire framework. Character is the permanent integration of all that learning into your organizational identity. Once you reach character, you return back to the first step, task, but you are engaging with it using improved clarity and a totally transformed identity.
So what does this all mean? I want to translate this cycle into something highly personal for you listening right now. The best way I conceptualize the diamond is to compare it to training as a competitive weightlifter.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right? You don't just walk into a gym and try to deadlift 500 pounds on day 1. You define your goal competition day. That is the task. You plan your workout regimen. You develop your baseline strength with lighter weights and mobility drills. You implement the heavy lift during a practice session. And then you assess your performance by watching a video recording of your lift.
And this is where the reflection comes in. You don't just see that you missed the lift. You reflect on the mechanics. You realize, oh, my lower back arched dangerously because my grip gave out.
Exactly. You learn from that reflection by dedicating the next 2 weeks to grip strengthening exercises.
Yeah.
And through hundreds of repeated cycles of this brutally honest feedback loop, your character transforms. You don't just do weightlifting. You physically and mentally become a disciplined athlete.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that perfectly illustrates why the diamond is distinct from other famous management loops you might be familiar with in the corporate world, like, the PDCA, cycle plan, do, check, act, or the OD loop used by the military: observe, orient, decide, act. Those are brilliant, highly effective models, but they focus almost entirely on process speed and tactical adjustment. They leave ethical and cultural formation entirely implicit.
Interesting.
The diamond structurally dictates that ethical formation isn't just a motivational poster in the break room. It is the mathematical, operational outcome of repeatedly surviving honest feedback cycles.
You literally construct your organizational character through the discipline of your daily processes. Like, if you have a process that avoids accountability and skips the reflux stage, you are actively building a character of blame and cowardice.
Exactly.
But if your process rigorously demands honest assessment, you build a character of integrity.
And to prove this cycle isn't just some academic theory born in a university lounge, the text provides a rapid-fire tour of how this plays out in the real world across radically different cultures.
Yeah, let's look at those proof of concepts. Singapore's water management is a primary example in the text.
Singapore is fascinating. It's a nation with virtually no natural water resources, yet they don't suffer from droughts. How? Because their water authority doesn't operate on Newtonian crisis response thinking.
Right.
They recruit engineers strictly based on problem-solving capacity, explicitly bypassing political affiliation. They use disciplined iteration to plan decades in advance, constantly running through the task, plan, implement, assess cycle to capture rainwater and desalinate ocean water. Their civilizational capability is a direct engineered result of the Diamond cycle.
The text also highlighted Finland's education system, which approaches competence from a completely different angle.
Yeah, Finland consistently ranks at the top of global education metrics, but they don't do it by relentlessly testing their students or enforcing rigid, centralized lesson plans.
Which is what we do.
Right. Instead, they focus entirely on teacher development. They structured their learning cycle to empower competence through continuous peer assessment, intense mentorship, and professional autonomy. They built a system where teachers are forced to reflect and learn from each other, which builds an institutional character of excellence.
And it isn't just national governments. Toyota's famous production system uses this exact mechanic on the factory floor.
Toyota revolutionized manufacturing by linking learning cycles directly to frontline practice. If a worker sees a defect on the assembly line, they don't just pass it along to avoid conflict, they pull the andon cord, which stops the entire production line.
Wow. Everyone stops.
Everyone stops. They instantly assess the defect, reflect on the mechanical cause, and learn how to fix it before the line restarts. By structurally forcing the organization to confront its failures in real time, they build operational excellence and organizational character simultaneously.
I'm also fascinated by the example of Porto Alegre, Brazil, operating on a municipal level.
Yeah, Porto Alegre utilized participatory budgeting. Instead of a distant, anxious political class deferring decisions, they gave actual citizens the authority to allocate municipal funds.
That's a huge shift.
It is. When you give everyday people responsibility and provide them a cycle to assess and learn from their funding choices, it radically reduces corruption. They aligned community capacity with actual authority.
But the sources also give us the dark, catastrophic inverse of this. What happens when a system actively tries to eliminate competency hierarchies and functional alignment entirely?
The results are historically horrific. The text cites the Cambodian Year Zero under the Khmer Rouge.
Right.
It was this terrifying experiment in radical egalitarianism. They actively hunted down and eliminated anyone with credentialed expertise or technical capability in an attempt to completely flatten society.
Just wipe them out.
And the result was not a utopia. It was mass starvation and total civilizational collapse.
The text also points to the Soviet nomenclature system as another failure.
Yes, that is the ultimate example of extreme credentialism and patrimonialism. In the Soviet system, advancing to a key role relied almost entirely on political loyalty to the party rather than technical ability.
Because competence was not structurally protected.
Exactly. And honest assessment was treated as political treason. So the system just rotted from the inside out until the operational collapse of the entire empire became inevitable.
Okay, so it is easy to see how a national government dealing with water scarcity or a massive manufacturing giant like Toyota uses this framework.
Yeah.
But how does this apply to you, the listener? Like, what if you were just trying to run a local community garden project or manage a small team of 5 people at a mid-sized office?
The author emphasizes what they call the fractal nature of the diamond.
Fractal?
Right. A fractal is a pattern that looks the same regardless of how far you zoom in or zoom out. The mechanics apply universally. It doesn't matter if you are governing a nation of millions, directing a corporate merger, or organizing a weekend neighborhood cleanup.
It's all the same cycle.
Competence is never accidental. It doesn't magically appear just because you wrote a beautiful mission statement. It is cultivated by systems that intentionally reinforce it.
Right.
By applying the cycle, defining the task, planning, developing your team, implementing, ruthlessly assessing the outcome, reflecting on the root causes, learning from them, and letting that forge your character, you finally bring your intentions and your reality into alignment.
It really fundamentally rewires how you evaluate the organizations in your own life. So, to synthesize our journey through Chapter 3 today, Competence is not a luxury. It is not an oppressive, elitist concept to be afraid of. It is the absolute, non-negotiable foundation of a functioning civilization.
Well said.
Closing the frustrating, widening gap between what we boldly claim in our brochures and what we actually deliver, well, it requires us to abandon reactive crisis management thinking. We have to embrace cyclical learning where capability, responsibility, and accountability are permanently linked together.
We must recognize that the true character of our institutions, and our own personal character for that matter, is not defined by the eloquent words we use to describe ourselves. It is defined entirely by the processes we practice every single day.
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to explore on your own. Think back to that analogy of the contractor with the brilliant sustainability brochure and the leaking roof.
Yeah.
If character is the ultimate, unavoidable mathematical outcome of the daily processes we participate in, take a hard look at your own workplace. Based on the specific way your team plans, acts, and assesses its failures, or based on how hard it tries to avoid assessing them, what kind of character is your organization building in you, entirely by accident?